In this demo, I'm going to be showing you how to install the Salesforce extension app from the Docusign App Center and how to use that in a Maestro workflow. And so we're starting in the Docusign App Center. This is where you can find all of the published extension apps that you may want to incorporate into your workflows. And first, we're just going to scroll down and find the Salesforce extension app and choose that one. And the first thing that we need to do to install this is just to log into our developer account. And so I'll just choose Login to install. And I'll enter my developer account credentials here and choose Login. And now we see the option to install the app. So I'm just going to choose that button. And you'll see this window pop up. This is just confirming that you want to install and authorize the Salesforce extension app. And it lets you know everything that the app will have consent to do. And so we'll click continue. And then we need to actually connect this to our Salesforce account. So we've already installed it in our Docusign developer account, but we need to connect it to an existing Salesforce account as well. I'm choosing Salesforce Production because I'm going to connect this to my Salesforce developer account. If you wanted to connect it to a sandbox, that's when you would choose Salesforce Test. And then I'll just log into my Salesforce account here. And I'll just have to grant consent to Docusign to allow Docusign to make changes to the data in my Salesforce account. And now you'll see when I go back to the App Center, you can see the app is installed. I have the option to manage my connections if I want to configure it with a different Salesforce account. But for now, we're all done here. And now that the extension app is installed, I'm going to show you how you can actually use this extension app in a Maestro workflow. So we're back in my developer account, and I'm going to choose the Agreements tab at the top of the page. Under Agreements, I'm going to choose Maestro Workflows in the left menu. And this is where I can see all of the workflows in my account. I'm going to create a new one just by choosing this Create Workflow button. The first thing I'm going to have to do here is add a participant to my workflow. The workflow that we're creating here is a workflow where a potential customer can fill out a form. It's going to be a web form, and they're requesting more information about a product. And so once they've filled out that form, then we're going to take the information that they've entered in that form and write it back to Salesforce in a lead record in Salesforce. And so since the participant is going to be our lead, we're going to name the participant here lead. And then we can save our workflow setup. And I want to give this workflow a name. So to do that, I'm going to choose Save Draft. And I can just enter my desired name here and choose Save again. And now we're ready to actually start building out the steps of our workflow. So we'll just choose Add a Step here. The first step we want to add is collecting data with a web form. So we'll choose this option, and then we need to actually configure that step. The first thing we need to do is choose which web form we want to use in the workflow. And so this drop-down menu will show you web forms that already exist in your account. And I have one called Request for Information. I'm going to choose that one here. Then we need to choose which participant will actually participate in this step, and in this case, it's going to be that lead. And that's all the configuration that's needed for this web form step, so now we can just choose Apply. To add our next step, you can just click on this little plus sign where it says Add a Step. And this is the step where we want to actually write back the information that we collected through the web form to Salesforce. And so we're going to find the Write Back to Salesforce step, and this is going to use that extension app that we installed earlier. And just like we did with the web form step, we're going to have to configure this one as well. The first thing I'm going to do is rename this step. We're going to call it Create Lead so that we have a better idea of what it's doing. And then we want to choose which Salesforce object we're going to be writing back to. And we want the lead object, so we can search for that and select it from this dropdown. And then because we don't want to duplicate any existing records in Salesforce, we need to add some rules here so that we can update the records that already exist if that's necessary. And be sure to change this dropdown from any rules to all rules like it says here. Then we need to select the fields that our rules will apply to, and so the first one we're looking for is company. We need to match the company name from Salesforce to the company that was input into the web form in the previous step of this workflow. So I'm choosing that lead company value that corresponds with my web form. And then we want to add one more rule. So we'll do the same thing we did before, but this time we're choosing the email field instead of the company field. And again, we'll choose the email field that corresponds with the web form from the previous step. And then we can save and close these rules. Now we need to choose which fields we actually want to map to in Salesforce, and so I can choose Manage Fields here. And then you'll just check the boxes next to any field that you want to write to in Salesforce. And so you can choose from this list. I won't walk through choosing every single one that I chose, but go ahead and choose whichever you'd like, and then go ahead and click on Save. And now all of those fields that I selected will appear here on the right, and I'm going to do some mapping between the Salesforce fields and the fields from my workflow, which were the fields in that web form. We know that for this field, we want to choose a corresponding field that came from that web form, so we'll just choose this Collect Data with Web Forms step. And then the corresponding value from that web form is this lead full name .value variable. So I'm choosing that one. And you'll go ahead and do that same thing for all of these other fields that you want to map to, and then you can click Apply. And now there's just one final step that we want to add to the workflow, so I'll do that by clicking Add a Step. And that step is going to be a confirmation screen to let the participants know that we've received their information and they're all done. So for the last time, we'll choose Configure again. And again, we need to choose which participant will be seeing this confirmation screen. And that's going to be our lead again. I'm just going to enter a custom message here to let them know that we've received their request. And then I can click Apply to save this step. And those are all of our workflow steps, so we'll just save the draft. And in order to test this out, we need to actually review and publish the workflow. So I'll just go ahead and publish it by clicking this button. And it's just going to ask me to authorize my account. So I'll just click this button, and that's giving my consent for this workflow to make changes on my behalf. And I'll also have to grant consent here in this consent window. This is just granting consent to the Maestro API that's working behind the scenes. And then finally, I can actually publish the workflow. And I'll see this window pop up to let me know that my workflow was published successfully. So now I can go to my workflows and actually see it in action. And here it is. You can see the Salesforce extension app example in my list of workflows. That's the one that I just created, and it also says published here. And so now, just to make sure that everything is working as we expected, we can actually kick off an instance of this workflow. So to trigger a new instance, you can start by choosing this three-dot menu. And we're going to choose Copy URL from the drop-down menu. And so this is copying to our clipboard the URL that we need to actually follow the workflow steps and execute an instance of the workflow as one of the participants. And when we copy that URL into our browser, we'll be directed to this web form. So this is the first step of the workflow, the web form that we configured. So I'm just acting as a participant. This is what the potential lead would see if they came to this URL. And I'll just fill out some information here. On the next page of the web form, I'll just keep filling out my information. And since this is a request for information workflow, I'm just going to give some more information about what I, the potential customer, am looking for. So I fill out that description. And then I can review everything that I entered in the web form. And if it looks good to me, I'll choose Submit. And after I submit the form, I'll be directed to the final step of the workflow. And so that's this confirmation screen that we configured. And so now I'm going to go back to Salesforce because I've completed the workflow as a participant, but what we care most about is that the information that I entered in that web form was actually written back to Salesforce through the extension app. And so I'm going to check, I'm in my Salesforce account, and I'll just go to the leads to see if I find that new lead here. And sure enough, that lead that I created is here at the bottom of the list. And so I didn't need to do that in Salesforce. All of the data was written back to Salesforce through the workflow and through that Salesforce extension app. And this is just one example of how you can use the Salesforce extension app in your Maestro workflows. You can also read from Salesforce. This was a write back example. There are lots of possibilities, but thanks for watching this demo.